already know him, I want you to meet my friend Eric Nelson, who uh, is at Emory University in Atlanta. And Eric, I was trying to remember, when did we meet for the first time? And I really can't remember, but what I do remember, what's very significant for me, is the week that I spent with you on the Emory campus shadowing your rehearsals at Emory and at Second Ponce de Leon Baptist Church in Atlanta on a Wednesday night. And with your, at the time, it was a different name. Was it it was
It was,
the original name of the Atlanta Sacred Chorale?
yeah, it's now Atlanta Master Chorale. At that point, it was Atlanta Sacred Chorale because we were specializing in sacred music.
Right, right, right. And I especially treasure some of the private conducting lessons I did with you on the Fauré Requiem. And I often quote you to our adult choir at Wilshire because, and I give the reference. I don't know if it was original with you, but the question that stuck with me is the line, "Where is the music going?
Mm.
Where is the music going?" And that is a question to live by, right? Right. So anyway, everyone, welcome. And Eric, welcome to our midst. If you don't know some of Eric's compositions, you really need to explore. Our congregation just went crazy the first time they heard his setting of Leaning on the Everlasting Arms, that is reframed as an art song with a cello solo, and just absolutely wonderful, wonderful. So, without further ado, Eric Nelson, glad you're here.
Hello, Doug. Hello, friends. Hello, everyone. It's great to see you. I know many of you, and those I don't, I hope we have a chance to meet in person at some point. Doug asked me, well, we were chatting. He called me to talk about another matter, as they say. And along the way, we were just talking with each other about how our various lives were coming through the pandemic and beginning to come out of the pandemic in some ways. And I mentioned to him that I feel like on some level, I'm going to spend the last part of my career rebuilding my programs. I feel like I am starting over in a lot of ways. And in some ways, that is a little depressing. In some ways, it's a little daunting because there's some things that I had, up and running that I didn't have to worry too much about. And now I'm worrying about them. And it's also kind of thrilling, right? It's an opportunity to decide which aspects of the program are most important to me, which things I want to make sure. If I can't rebuild everything at once, what do I kind of go after first? What do I prioritize? Is there anything that I couldn't let go? And is there anything that I've always kind of wished was in the program that now is the time to add it? So all of those things, this is going to be not just a plenary session with me. You will be delighted to know I have no PowerPoint. And this is just going to be a chance for us to talk because we're all in the same boat, I suspect. I do occasionally, rarely, but occasionally talk to a colleague and say, so what's it like? How you doing as you're getting started again? And they'll say, oh, I never stopped. Rehearsals kept going. We just, they're implying they basically pretended the pandemic never happened. And there are some people who did that, but they're pretty rare. I think most people are in a variant of the same position that I'm in and that you are probably in. FYI, in my getting down in the weeds in my specific situation, I had auditions earlier in the month for Atlanta Master Chorale from the Metro Atlanta area, and we had no idea how many people were going to be interested in even auditioning at this point. And we auditioned 66 people, which I thought was a pretty good turnout. Most of them really fine musicians. So I had that thing that we all enviably wish we had, which was making choices between who's in and who's out, and everybody's good. So that was the first start of my August, and that was a happy thing. We've had 2 rehearsals so far, both good, and we rehearse on the campus of Emory University where I teach, and everybody has to wear a mask. Emory has a mask mandate that everybody on the campus wears a mask in indoor spaces. So you're allowed to take them off walking between buildings outside, but then as soon as you step over the threshold into any building, you put the mask on. Therefore, since choirs rehearse inside, we have to sing with a mask on. So that was, since I did almost no singing at all last year, and we may have a chance to talk about what your last year and a half was like, but I did basically no singing at all last year. Being able to have a choir in front of me with a mask on was absolutely thrilling. I do think it cuts out some of the overtones. It sounds pretty good, better than I had feared. But I think if we sang a page with a mask on, and then I asked everybody to take the mask off, and they sang the same page, I think I'd fall off the podium. I think the difference would be pretty fantastic. But we're not doing that, and I don't get the chance to hear what it would sound like the other way. So just hearing everybody sing with a mask is pretty great. And at this point, anyway, they've removed all the social distancing requirements. So I actually have a choir looking like a choir in front of me. Part of the reason that we didn't do any choir last year was that they didn't invite most of the students back, so they were literally not on campus. And the other was that Emory was one of the few places in the country, because we're within walking distance of the CDC. We were one of the few places in the country that actually insisted that we do the 12 feet apart mandate. And most people did 6, and even 6 was hard, but 12 was ridiculous because it was 12 feet left to right and front to back, 144 square feet. So the joke I told people was I had 12 freshman girls. That's all you could fit on the stage of the concert hall, was 12 people at that distance. 12 freshman girls singing, 2-part middle school music. And I had them, they were all singing alone while looking at other people singing alone. And that was, it wasn't really choir.
Eric, at the risk of getting off in the weeds, could you say a little more about the decision not to do any social distancing, or to set that aside? That was based upon what? Or is it just university policy, or is it policy you came up with?
It is university policy, and it was based on that, was it July CDC announcement? I've forgotten now. I've forgotten now when exactly the chart came out with that we've all seen, that has the frowny faces with a mask on down the left side of the page, and the smiley happy faces with no mask on down the right side of the page. And there was a point, I think it was in July, where they actually had singing in a group indoors, and it was the green smiley face with no mask saying safest. There were all kinds of hugely important meetings with people that were in charge of COVID policy. And I was on one of those, and we asked all those very direct questions. Are we allowed to have audiences? Are we allowed to sing with no social distancing? And this was, frankly, just before Delta took off. Nonetheless, I got all the answers of yes, we're good. And that's what we're going with.
Right.
Delta is a problem, of course, to many, and it might be a problem to us, and maybe we can talk about that too. Georgia's not very good, our numbers, but Emory's bubble, Emory's requiring that everybody on campus be vaccinated. All faculty is vaccinated, all staff is vaccinated.
Okay.
And so obviously students are going to be students, right? They're still going to have weekends, and we don't know where they're going. But it's still, we feel like tipping it in the direction where we can meet together and be okay. They've also reserved a part of the Emory Conference Hotel. And if anybody has COVID, at least they did this last year, they were quarantined for a week or 10 days, not even in their dorm room, but in that hotel. I'm not sure they're going to do that again this year, because the year is just beginning, but they're good about trying to keep it clamped down. Emory's numbers were way lower than any of our peer institutions in Georgia. So that's where we are. Is anybody else singing with reasonable social distancing, a foot, 3 feet, that, nothing? Is that kind of where we are? Can I see a show of hands? Is that, so most, Sarah, what are you doing? Your hand didn't go up.
We have put a hold on our choir
Okay.
We have majority of our congregation is would be at risk, and many of them just have not returned. So we have a praise band that sings, and we still try to maintain at least a 3-foot distance.
Right.
We're all vaccinated, but most of the cases that we've seen, even just in our church, are vaccinated people just having a lesser experience with COVID. So we're still trying to maintain some distance.
Carrie, Carrie's my music minister. I've been attending South Main Baptist Church every Sunday morning since this all started. And my wife and I, it's our church now. And I've watched you struggle from where it was just you, your organist, your pastor, and maybe one other person reading scripture for months and months. And you made the choice to, I'll use the word pretend, that sounds negative, but I don't mean it that way, to pretend that the congregation was there. And the organist pulled the reeds and opened it up, and you sang, and sometimes even moved your arms as though people were singing. And that worked for my wife and I. That felt like church to me. A lot of other friends of mine very creatively did sermons from outside in the garden, and sitting at the seashore, and prepared videos. And it was we all handled the last year differently. But Carrie, fill everybody in on where you are now with the congregation and with the choir.
Yeah, we felt that the view of empty pews would be a negative sense when there's the worst of it. And so we tried to avoid the empty pews as much as possible because we just thought it would be depressing to see that. And then mask or no mask, we realized we had to make a switch back to folks want to see folks there. When we started to come back in with a limited number of capacity, masked, and then like you and all, when the CDC ripped the veil off, our highest number was mid-July. I think we had probably the most attend our worship in the middle of July ever when we, were able to do so. Now, no capacity limitations. We all are masked. I am spacing the choir, and it's all been sort of a self-selected number deal. So I've averaged about 35 to 40, sometimes 45 on a good Sunday in the choir loft. And for whatever reason, I could make all sorts of APBs to come to choir. That's about as much as I'm getting. And a lot of them are the young that aren't coming are the younger singers in my choir, oddly enough. So it's the mamas and papas who have kids in schools that children aren't vaccinated. Those are the ones that are not attending the rehearsal. I will tell all of you, South Main did a survey earlier on and learned that 90 to 95% of our congregation was vaccinated. Once we learned that 12 and up, that percentage was vaccinated, we felt confident to move forward with what we were doing in terms of singing and worshiping as a congregation. So that has been our go. And for all of you, also the switch of caring for our seniors and those at risk. Children will be fine. Caring for us to all of a sudden now it's, oh my goodness, the kids. It's been a really fascinating, switch of paradigm there. And so we've had to put a pause or hold on our children's programming, children's choirs. I am using a youth choir starting up this Sunday, as a matter of fact, because our youth are able to be vaccinated. And so we felt that was something we could do. And honestly, quite honestly, I told our family minister, I said, I can't go another year without youth choir. They can't, we can't. It's got to happen, even if they're 20 feet apart, I don't care. Because that program is needing to happen. So anyway, that's where South Main is currently.
Thank you, Carrie. I said that it was a chance for us to maybe redo things a little bit. One of the things that I redid, my concert choir at school, my top chamber choir, historically about 50 voices. has met since before I arrived at Emory, always late afternoon, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It was 4 to 5:30 Monday, Wednesday, and then 4 to 5 on Friday. Whenever I meet anybody at an ACDA convention and they find out that I've got choir rehearsal on Friday afternoon in college at 4 o'clock, they go, "You've got to be kidding." And they come. And yeah, I mean, historically, people would say, there's a thing going on at home where I live in Seattle, and mom and dad are asking if I can go. Would you be okay with me booking a flight and missing Friday rehearsal? It's just, Friday rehearsal comes first. And I thought about that along with everything else over the pandemic, and thought, why? The wind ensemble at Emory meets 2 days a week. The orchestra at Emory meets 2 days a week, and for 2 hours. And I just decided, we'll just tack on an extra half an hour, and we'll meet 4 to 6 on Monday, 4 to 6 on Wednesday, and boot the Friday. And no one will ever know, because the culture is completely broken now. So other than the seniors that are coming back this year, they won't even remember that there used to be a Friday. And that'll just be what the course syllabus is, and that'll be what we do from now on. And that will relieve them of that Friday choir problem. It'll relieve me of when I have to go out of town to do something, finding a sub, that, having the accompanist take the rehearsal for me, all that kind of stuff. So that is a small thing, I suppose, but it's a sea change in a way, and something that, frankly, I don't think I would have considered doing if it weren't for the pandemic. My neighbors on the campus is a fabulous Methodist church, Glen Memorial Methodist Church on the campus, with a beautiful acoustic and a cassavant and a wonderful team of musicians. And they have a new organist, a recently minted master's degree from Eastman. And the music minister there and she, the new organist, and I went to lunch the other day so I could meet her. And the music minister was bragging on her and her creativity and what she's doing and what a fine player she is, and that we're glad she's in Atlanta. And along the way said, and she's doing a series of videos for the congregation explaining how the organ works and what it's like to play it. And I know some of you have probably done things on how you plan worship, right? And that kind of stuff. And again, I don't know that she or they would have done such a thing. But now we are pretty comfortable speaking into a camera, recording it, uploading it somewhere. And so there's some aspects of video life that I suspect I'm going to keep. I can imagine a situation where I would assign, in terms of the college students, assign them something in terms of Master Chorale, ask them to consider clicking on something, and where there might be a fabulous recording of a piece that we're working on, right? And it's just going to be easy to kind of send them that video, or any number of things that one might do. I could, if there's a particularly tricky passage, I could sit down at the piano and talk about it, right, and kind of play about it, and then link to another group. And there's some of the things that we've been doing that probably we'll keep, or at least know that that's an option for us now. Is there anything for any of you that you didn't do in the before times, and that you did do during COVID, and that you might keep doing afterwards?
Chip Handrick here from Second Baptist and Liberty, and that just got me thinking about. I know that several of you on the screen during the pandemic, when we were not meeting, did a lot of video production. I know Ryan, you did. I know Doug, you did. Has anyone continued? Doug, you said a couple of months ago, we decided we're not going to continue this. We're going to do our in-person service streaming, and that's it, because we just don't have the resources to create a separate video service like we had been. Is anyone at all doing two different things, where you have your live service, but for people virtually, you produce something else?
So we have three things going on, I guess, essentially each week. We have our live service. We have two live services, one at 9 and one at 11. And then we have an online service that happens at the same time that is pre-recorded material. For the 9 o'clock, it's exactly what's happening at that 9 o'clock time, including the sermon, which is pre-recorded. For the 11 o'clock, it's some of the music from the previous past week, even though the music happening at that time would be a little bit different. And then they'll see that following week. And then we have one more arrangement that we do each week that goes on TV the following week. So at least we got out of the pre-recording traditional music service Wednesday prior to, because that was kind of a big hassle, especially now that all choir rehearsals are back and everything for us. It was just going to be too much to mix together. Eric, to go to your question though, I would say that the one thing that I did adapt to and kept doing was trying to get as much information into the choir members' hands to help prepare them for music, whether it was part predominant music or part predominant parts for them for the music that we were looking at, or videos, examples, anything that would help them learn their music quicker at home.
Right. To go back to Chip's question, we have several pastoral residents who come to Wilshire for 2 years and then go on to callings in other places. We have one pastoral resident right now who is immunocompromised. And she brought to the worship planning team the suggestion that, yes, as Chip said, we made a intentional strategic decision. We were going to go back to in-person. We were not going to continue pre-recorded virtual services, if you will. However, she offered to run point on we do live stream the 11 o'clock service, 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock. She offered to be the host for a Zoom party to watch the 11 o'clock live stream and have the capacity to have some interaction with other people who either are remote members, we picked up several of those during the pandemic, or who are members who are immunocompromised and still, in spite of the high level of vaccination at Wilshire, do not feel comfortable coming in person. I thought it was a fascinating adaptation. We ran a little bit of a pilot project. It went well. And so now that is going to be part of something we would not have done pre-pandemic. Is live streaming has happened pre-pandemic, but now there's a little Zoom party happening, and we know it's happening, and we have a host, and that person, interacts with people for a few minutes before the service, just as if we were greeting each other before the service, in person. And I think it's a lovely adaptation.
Clever. Ryan, you still sound awfully busy to me, my friend. That's still a lot. I have some friends that teach public school, elementary school, and some upper school too. And they are, if the school district is having some in-person classes and some Zoom students, most school districts around here now have a separate staff. I don't know how they're affording it. Where the in-person teachers are only dealing with in-person, and then there's a separate teacher doing the online stuff. And that's still difficult, but it's a lot better than a teacher, which they were doing for a while, especially with kids, young kids, trying to deal with the students that are in front of them, and then not pacing too far away from the camera because other people are at home watching and all of that. We went through a lot. So, we're all, part of my guiding star emotionally has been everybody is doing the best they can. But I felt like I was a first-year teacher for most of last year. I felt like I was out of my depth, trying to do things I wasn't trained to do, and not doing the thing I was best at. And, a lot of folks, and maybe you, were at least doing some choir, but as I say, I didn't. And I've had a lot of friends who the closest they could get was to have a quartet. Michael Dowderman next door at Glenn had a quartet coming in individually. So he was meeting a soprano, a tenor, a alto, a bass at his congregation on like Thursday, whenever they could get there. And he'd spend 20 minutes recording each individual on the anthem and the hymns. And then he would put those together into a little quartet. And then that evolved into the four of them could actually meet in the same space and be, we've been through a lot, haven't we? But it was the most difficult part for me, and the part that I'm most thrilled about to get back to is there's an aspect of me personally, which hopefully is not a demon that you fight. And that's that I kind of see the world through the lens of rehearsal. And so we all have the things that are going on in the world on our news feed, and we all, turn on the television to see the local news and the international news. And you can kind of feel like people are terrible and humans are broken, and we can get into the theology of that pretty easily. But when I have rehearsal, I also know that people are wonderful and amazing, and music exists, and at least on a semi-regular basis, in tune chords exist. And it reminds me what happens when people work together and we're singing poetry, scripture and thought. And it reminds us of what is best about what is and what could be. And I find that when rehearsals are happening in my life, that kind of balances everything else. There's almost a sense to which my life as a musician is truth. That's really the way the world is. And then this other stuff also exists. And right, we kind of have to deal with that. And that's kind of my problem, is that I define myself too much by how the last rehearsal went. And so to have a year and a half without being Eric Nelson, the musician, and instead being Eric Nelson, the crisis manager, was really humbling for me and really good for me, I think, to think about, what am I when I'm not a conductor? What am I when I'm not a musician? And what is the church choir then when we're not singing together? What is the congregation when we're not meeting together? And so I think these are not thoughts that we've not had, but I think we were forced to face them squarely. And coming out of that, as everything starts up again, I find that there's a good chance that we and our people are going to be more grateful. I got emails the morning after our first Atlanta Master Chorale from people saying that they were on cloud 9 the next morning. They could, hardly stand it because they had sung the night before. And one of my sopranos says, "There's nothing in the world like singing with friends." And I'm singing with friends for the glory of God while leading worship probably beats that even a little bit further. So it's just that to get to re-engage, even though Carrie's saying or implying that the numbers are down from what it was before, and there's some people missing that should be there, and hopefully will, there's that worry, are they coming back? And I have that with all of my groups as well. Master Chorale, the answer was yes, but this week I'm doing my school auditions. I have more till 7 o'clock tonight, and more on Friday, and more Saturday afternoon. And right now, I've not heard a single freshman tenor, not one. I've got a few coming back, and I've heard some wonderful sopranos and altos. Fabulous. And my worry is I'm not going to be able to put the fabulous sopranos and altos in, because I'm not going to be able to balance the choir. And then what? So we all have issues. But my point there was that in the re-engagement, not only are we allowed to redefine some things, but as we recapture some things, I think there's a new joy in it, or a reminder of the joy and the importance of what we do, right? We weren't, my wife only half jokingly said that we've had a year and a half of spiritual warfare. We were not allowed to be together. We were not allowed to visit family members in some cases. We were not allowed to hug each other. We were not allowed to sing together, and we were not allowed to go to church. And she looked at me one day and said, "Okay, think about that list," right? And she says, I know it's a virus, I know it's medical, I know it's biological, but still, this is, we're under siege here. And I've certainly felt that personally. And I don't know if any of you want to weigh in on that as well.
I will say quick to your response, Eric. South Main's not an applause church. We don't typically applaud regularly in our services, except for maybe a large cantata or big Christmas event or something, a guest choir or something happens in worship. Since the past month or so, month and a half, whether it's Yuri doing a prelude piece or a choir piece that was spirit-filled, this past Sunday was a bell piece. And folks, I love bells, but our adult bronze choir brought them to applause Sunday. And we talked about that, and we said, what is the deal? Why, and I think it's your point, Eric. I think they are just glad to be back. They're glad to be worshiping. They're glad to hear music and to see their friends and their family offering it up in worship. And they just can't help but just applaud. So to your point. And I love that quote from Mons, Kyle.
There's been moments like that too here at Kirkwood that wouldn't happen before the pandemic, where something was just a natural response to like that, Carrie. Yeah. And it has made me think of my 2 times in Kenya, where everything is exterior, everything, all the emotions are among the people there. It's genuinely always excited and this loud, and everything's outward pouring. And yeah, for a lot of our churches where it's like, oh, we're contemplative and we're more introverted in our worship, it's been refreshing to see it come out. I think genuinely, not just like audience. I don't think congregations looking at themselves in those moments as an audience. They're just sharing their gratitude and their gratefulness to be able to hear things in person together. Yeah,
I think that's right. To go back to being in the weeds a little bit, you have more experience, all of you, probably conducting a choir with masks on more than I have. I'm just kind of figuring it out now, but I found myself in my first 2 master chorale rehearsals saying things like, I have to do my job, right? So I have to respond to what I hear. It's what I do. And this is what I'm hearing. And I think the phrase I used was, I have to ask, right? And I'm not going to apologize for asking, but it could be that what I'm asking you can't do. The biggest part of that is diction, right? And it's not impossible, even if you don't do the singer's math thing, it's not impossible. But it is, good diction in a choir is problematic in the best of times. It always has been, right? People don't want to pronounce the letter D. And, we know that, and it's fine. And if the word is hard, you're not going to hear the H, and it's our life. But as soon as rehearsal began and we started getting that problem, I would just say, listen, I have to ask. I can't hear the H. I can't hear the K. We need to do the T. The audience, the congregation is not going to understand the words. The words are beautiful. They're important. Can you at least know that you're doing the best you can, right? If you pronounced it well, if you sang it well, and I still can't hear it, then I guess that's just tough, right? But at least you need to know that you tried your best. So I'm giving them I'm trying to be understanding on one hand, and also say, but we still have to make music as well as we can. So that's kind of where I am. I'm also really planning at school to start over. I really am. I'm assuming that this is like coming into a position where you're following, and this happens, maybe this has happened to you. If it hasn't, it might at some point in your career. Sometimes you take a new position and it's filled with potential, but for some reason it has fallen into decay when you step in, and you've got some rebuilding to do, right? And some healing to do. And there's a whole lot of things on the list of the professional musical skill set that you've got to start to teach, because they seem to not know it, right? It's just, the things are supposed to be together, and for some reason they don't seem to realize that. How can they not hear how none of the words are lining up, and you're not supposed to slide into every note? It's just sometimes we find ourselves in a position where we are beginning to teach basics, And I found over the years when that happens to me that what a great privilege that is, right? To be the one to kind of raise somebody's game and to calmly and hopefully inspirationally explain why if you do these things, we sound better, and it's appreciated more. And so I'm telling myself at school, which begins in earnest on Monday, that I said auditions are this week, we start rehearsal on Monday, that I'm assuming that the choir kind of isn't going to be where they were before we left. And I'm going to have to not get angry because they aren't doing the thing. I'm going to have to gently, warmly, and delightfully explain to them what the thing is, and then hopefully lead them to the point where they can do the thing. And right. So I don't know how that is for you, but I think if I were younger, I would have expected them to get right back up, on the horse, as they say, and right back to where they were before. And I would have been really kind of not belligerent. I've never been belligerent, but I would have been very much right on them. Come on, people, come on, people. And I'm not. I'm doing that with Master Chorale because that's fun. But at school, I'm really planning on just kind of gently moving along. I picked a lot of music. Not a lot of new music, a lot of things in the library that I've done a bunch of times, but I think they can really enjoy. And it's not easy, but music I think they will absolutely be able to enjoy and sing well. And so yeah. Anybody else in that position too? Have you found yourself having to reteach skills that you thought were well in hand?
Yeah, yeah. I think I've come to that. Our choir was off for a long time. We started back again without masks because everybody was vaccinated. We thought this was about over, and then oops. So we shut the choir down again. I ordered masks from Sean, by the way, Doug, who the person you put us on to. They're not here yet. I suspect she's overwhelmed because I think everybody's in the same boat. We thought we were almost over this thing, and now it's back. So I'm going to start rehearsal in 2 weeks with masks. But the thing that I thought of just now was, I wonder if, with all of our emphasis now on consonants that we're going to have to do, if once the masks come off, this will actually be a good thing, almost like a batter swinging a bat with weights, So now the masks come off and we've been working on this, and it's like suddenly there it is. I don't know. Maybe that's might be the positive of all this. So
I like it.
I like your really positive outlook on that potential situationship.
Listening was tough for us. Distance from each other with masks, the choir got out of practice of listening as an ensemble. So when we came together, we were a choir of soloists. That was one of the things that we struggled with. And then I will say on our end, my gesture was hideous. I found myself, all the things that I learned through my schooling of trying to bring things in and trying to show less and be more, browbeating and flagging in the Fifth Fleet that we tend to do and want to do viscerally as a conductor, and letting the voice and their musicality, all those things that we strive to do, out the window. I mean, I'm like, I need more sound. I need more, whatever the things we're talking about. And I'm finding my gesture is just crazy. And so I've had to kind of, I don't know if y'all have experienced that, but I find myself in the rehearsal just exhausted because I'm like, why am I not getting what, anyway, that's something I've had to self actualize and medicate.
Yeah, I found that too. I've been noticing that as well. I do wonder, to let us off the hook just a smidgen, I do wonder whether the masks are causing that a little bit. I do think that there's some zip and zing and presence in the sound that we feel in our bones. It's even hard to define, and it's not there. And I think that we want it. And I think that's partly where the extra windmills landing the plane are coming from. But we'll fix it. Doug, we're running up on our 45 minutes. Do you need to redirect here?
Yeah, we probably ought to try to land the plane here, but Wow, this has been a great conversation. I think again and again we come back to the theme of we are all in this together, no matter the size of our steeple, the size of the choir. This has impacted us all, and we're navigating through some rough waters still. We actually, I think, yeah, to Chip's point, I think I thought, oh, we've broken through the shoals and it's smooth sailing. Not so much. Not so much. Didn't see this around the bend. But hope you'll continue to find this community a source of strength and encouragement and inspiration, and honestly, just practical how to get this done through the next month, the next bit of the fall, and hopefully 2022 will again look different. Let me tell you about our next meeting. We're gonna get back to our bi-monthly meetings with various presenters. Some of us folks of our tribe, ministers of music, and then other folks like our esteemed colleague Eric Nelson along the way. Eric, thank you so much for sharing this time with us today. 2 weeks from today, Thursday, September the 9th, is our next meeting. We are going to make an adjustment in the time going forward. I talked to some folks about tweaking our time. Today's time was because of the CBF General Assembly. But when we resume in 2 weeks, we're looking at 10:30 Eastern and 9:30 Central. 10:30 Eastern, 9:30 Central, Thursday, September the 9th. Our guest that day will be Tommy Shepard, not a stranger to some of you, who's Minister of Music at Hendricks Avenue in Jacksonville, Florida. Just this past spring, Tommy completed his doctorate of sacred music at SMU here in Dallas. And he wrote a fascinating dissertation project, and I'm going to read the title to you, and I'll send the title to you later. It's academic in its length. Here's the title of his dissertation: I Can't Breathe. Think about that for a minute. I Can't Breathe, toward a pneumatology of singing and musicking for racial justice. Pneumatology in the sense of a theology of the Holy Spirit, P-N-E-U, pneuma, as in spirit. And Tommy's going to come talk to us about some things he's discovered along the way that are organic to his music ministry in Jacksonville, and very particular to that place, and the ways that they have built relationships with Black congregations and Black musicians in Jacksonville. I think it's a fascinating model. I think it might generate ideas for us all. And Tommy's a wonderful musician. Grew up at Broadway Baptist Church in Fort Worth in the Tom Stoker era. Those of you who remember Tom Stoker and that legendary program that was there once upon a time. So Tommy Shepard in 2 weeks. So really hope you'll be back for that. And if you have colleagues who might benefit from Polyphony, send me or Kyle their email. We'll add them to the email list. I want to finish just very briefly by sharing just an excerpt of a poem with you. I know sometimes we finish with a scripture or a hymn or a benediction or a prayer. And I was thinking about this yesterday and kind of going back and picking up a thread from this conversation. Maybe Eric's wife's comment actually resonates with me, the spiritual warfare comment. I will confess to you that a certain level of exhaustion coming out of this, and some of us have shared that along the way. And although I don't use the term evangelical too much anymore, I still believe very much in warm-hearted religion. In the sense of Charles Wesley's, Charles Wesley's experience, his heart was strangely warmed. And I will confess to you a struggle with a spiritual dryness. And some days I don't know what to do about that. I think this is perhaps why God called me to be a music minister, because maybe God knew I needed music to keep my heart fresh. So that takes me to a George Herbert poem that has just been a treasure. I mean, all of us know George Herbert. Let all the world in every corner sing. Love bade me welcome. Ralph Vaughan Williams, the Five Mystical Songs. But next to the Bible, maybe and the hymnal, the collected poems of George Herbert are the book that I would save from a burning house.
Mm.
And so I'm going to show you this, and I will email this to you. This is a poem, maybe not quite as well known, titled The Flower. And when I think about the flower, I want you to think about a tulip or an iris or a peony that emerges from a bulb or a tuber. And it flourishes for a moment, and then it draws back into this shriveled thing that's underground for a time, and then miraculously comes up yet again. Almost a metaphor for resurrection, right? I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm just going to read just a bit of this longer poem to you. I hope you can see this. Herbert lived 1593 to 1633. He was a brilliant orator, went to Trinity, Cambridge. He ended his life, though, as a pastor of a small rural parish. And I've always thought about the brilliant poetry he left us being basically a country preacher. How fresh, O Lord, how sweet and clean are thy returns, even as the flowers in spring, to which, besides their own demesne, the late past frosts tributes of pleasure bring. Grief melts away like snow in May, as if there were no such cold thing. Who would have thought my shriveled heart could have recovered greenness? It was gone quite underground, as flowers depart to see their mother root when they have blown. Where they together, all the hard weather, dead to the world, keep house unknown. And now in age I bud again. After so many deaths I live and write. I once more smell the dew and rain and relish versing. O my only light, it cannot be that I am he on whom thy tempest fell all night. These are thy wonders, Lord of love, to make us see we are but flowers that glide, which when we once can find and prove, thou hast a garden for us where to bide. Who would be more, swelling through store, forfeit their paradise by their pride? And I gotta say, the line that just gives me hope is in that next to last stanza. And now in age I bud again. After so many deaths I live and write. I once more smell the dew and rain and relish versing and relish singing and relish leading in worship, making music. Well, I leave you with The Flower by George Herbert. And I recommend to you George Herbert almost every day of the week. If you're struggling with prayer like I do, you can pray some George Herbert on one hand and pray the Psalms on the other, and it will do you a world of good. Okay, appreciate you all. Eric Nelson, thank you so much for being with us, and I hope to see you all in 2 weeks. All right?
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Have a good day. Be well.